Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a great day. I'm really pleased to be able to join you for a third weekend to talk about the writings of Oscar Wilde. Today, we're going to look at a terrific tale called The Young King. And once again, Oscar Wilde delivers a powerful message in the form of a folk tale. Like the picture of Dorian Gray and The Happy Prince, this tale rehearses themes and motifs about the power and lure of beauty and of earthly things, the dangers of vanity, and the transcendent power of faith, so familiar ideas. In the picture of Dorian Gray, we examine the concept of hope, largely through a character who resists hope. In The Happy Prince, we explore the concept of peace through a character who achieves a sort of heavenly peace through compassion and through personal sacrifice. In our tale today, The Young King, we have a tale again of growth and insight and a message about where true joy resides, and I would say true Christian joy. The tale is pretty straightforward. A young man who's only 16 years old is set to be made king of his land. Until recently, however, he was a humble goat herd's son who lived modestly in the forest. But as the tale goes on to explain, he was actually born the king's grandson. He was banished at birth because his mother, the princess, had him with a man we learn, and this is a quote, much beneath her in station. So he wasn't worthy of the princess. Indeed, this princess and her lover are both killed by the king as a punishment. Well, the young king, until his 16th birthday, was raised by his this goat herding peasant couple as their own child. But the old king, towards the end of his life, and it's out of guilt or some other motive, decides that this young man now should become king. And he's sent for, brought to the palace, and acknowledged as the heir to the throne. Now, this sudden change in geographical location and class, he goes from being a peasant to royalty, has a huge impact on this young man. We learn that, quote, this wonderful palace of which he now found himself lord seemed to him to be a new world, fresh, fashioned for his delight. In another moment, he is spied, quote, kneeling in real adoration before a great picture that had just been brought from Venice. In fact, we learn that he is completely infatuated with beautiful objects jewels, pottery, silks. But we learn that this coronation day robe is the thing that occupied him the most. He's about to be made king, and this robe is totally all consuming. He covets this robe of tissued gold and a ruby studded crown and a scepter with its rows and rings of pearls. So, just like we've seen in other of Wilde's work, we have a character who is sort of caught up in the earthly and the rich sort of material of the world. Um, Never before, the narrator tells us, had he felt so keenly or with such exquisite joy the magic and mystery of beautiful things. This tale takes a familiar turn, the way folk tales often do, and we witness his three dreams. The young king has three dreams one night. One might really call them nightmares on the eve before he's to be crowned king. Now, written nearly 50 years after Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, I wonder if Wilde is invoking this narrative structure. He seems to have that journey of the three visions. It has a similar feel for sure. Now, in the first dream, the young king meets a weaver who is making the young king's robe. The weaver describes his incredibly difficult and impoverished life. When the young king asks what this weaver thinks of the king, he says, he's a man like myself. The young king wakes with a cry from this dream, but falls back to sleep and has a second one. In this dream, he's on a boat powered by enslaved people where a diver plunges again and again into the water to retrieve pearls. When the diver is done with his work, he dies. Again, the young king wakes with a cry and he falls back asleep and has a third dream. Now, in this dream, he witnesses the sort of fantastic archetypal figures of death and avarice, representing greed. So these are types that represent different qualities. Death wants to take some of avarice's servants. Now, has got these many people toiling. And avarice refuses everything, as a greedy person would. They want everything for themselves. And death, nevertheless, succeeds in killing all the men who were toiling away under avarice's watch. And what are these men doing? And this is the most important thing, right? They are mining rubies for the young king's crown. Now, like Ebenezer Scrooge, who endures his own 3 dreams, the young king undergoes his own transformation of heart and mind. Indeed, on the day of his coronation, he dresses in his goatherd's clothing and heads to the church. He's either condemned by those who recognize him because he's not dressed properly, or he's completely mistaken for a peasant. For the people who do recognize him as the young king, including towards the end of the tale, the very bishop at the church who will install him as king, they belittle him for his unceremonious judgment. They don't like what he's wearing. He doesn't look good. The bishop says, "Sure, this should be to thee a great day of joy and not a day of abasement." The young king retorts, "Shall joy wear what grief has fashioned?" So a change of conscience, right? He's seen all of this hardship producing the beautiful riches that he's been so infatuated with. The bishop scolds the young king, saying, quote, "The burden of this world is too great for one man to bear, and the world's sorrow too heavy for one heart to suffer." The young king snaps back, "Sayest thou that in this house?" But while the bishop may have forgotten the example of Jesus Christ's burden, the young king does not. In a scene symmetrical to the one earlier in the story, where the young king kneels before a painting from Venice, he now kneels before the image of Christ, and he prays. Well, nevertheless, the nobles who don't know what's happening inside the church, they arrive and they actually threaten to kill this young king, saying he is unworthy to rule over us, all because he's not dressed in the proper clothing. This is pretty fascinating. And then in a miraculous moment, through the stained glass of the church, the sunbeams weave a robe of gold, and the young king receives his staff and crown. A crown bestowed on him, we take it by God himself. So Oscar Wilde gives us a powerful transformation story. The dreams the young king has are yet another instance of God's grace. A grace that Dorian denies, as you'll recall. What I find particularly compelling in this tale is the way Wilde uses the backdrop of England's Industrial Revolution for so much of the dream imagery. We meet weavers working in factories, we meet laborers, we meet servants toiling. It's a story of haves and have-nots, and Wilde weaves Christian values and ideals, and he puts them up against the hypocrisy he sees in a world driven by objects and earthly wealth, and once again, surface beauty. But joy, real joy, we know, is not to be found on the surface. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in person next week.